cases. The rush to case resolution was to eliminate all threats of legal investigations by means of more payouts. To this hour, not a single plaintiff's day in court to present evidence in a trial has come to fruition. The more persistent and uncooperative plaintiffs have dealt with the special mediator of Hellerstein's court, Sheila Birnbaum, another key Jew. Sheila Birnbaum, the special mediator, is a partner in the law firm of Skadden Arps, a leading corporate law firm with close business ties to Israel. The firm calls itself, quote, one of the leading U.S. legal advisors to Israeli companies doing business and raising capital outside of Israel. The firm's website proclaims, many of our attorneys are thoroughly familiar with the legal structure, business environment, and political system of Israel, and several have been admitted to the bars of both Israel and New York, and are fluent in Hebrew and English, unquote. Israeli individuals and companies, however, are suspects and defendants in the crimes of 9/11. At least 200 Israeli suspects were arrested in connection with 9/11. Certainly, these salient facts cannot be mere random coincidence. The key individuals who arranged the privatization and obtained control of the 10.6 million square foot complex known as the World Trade Center shortly before its destruction are Larry Silverstein, former Israeli commando and Westfield shopping mall tycoon Frank Lowy, and Port Authority Chairman Louis M. Eisenberg, who authorized the transfer of the leases. Silverstein, Lowy, and Eisenberg all hold senior positions in organizations such as the Anti-Defamation League, or ADL, the United Jewish Appeal, UJA, a billion-dollar Zionist charity organization, and the New York-based Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Jewish Holocaust. Silverstein is a former chairman of UJA. This organization raises hundreds of millions of dollars every year for a network of Jewish agencies in the United States and Israel. Eisenberg, who was instrumental in obtaining the lease for Silverstein, is on the planning board of the UJA. Eisenberg, in his role with the Port Authority, was the key person who negotiated the 99-year leases for Silverstein and Frank Lowy's Westfield America, who were in fact the low bidders for the lease on the 110-story towers and the retail mall. 6 weeks before the World Trade Center towers were destroyed, the Port Authority, with the assistance of Jewish Chairman Eisenberg, completed the process of leasing them for 99 years to Larry Silverstein, the developer who had built 7 World Trade Center, which mysteriously self-demolished at 5:25 p.m. on 9/11, although the building wasn't hit by a plane. Simultaneously, the retail space underneath the complex was leased to Westfield America, the U.S. division of an Australian company that is one of the world's largest operators of shopping malls. Paula Goldberger wrote in The New Yorker, 20th May 2002. Czechoslovakian-born Israeli commando Frank Lowy, a former fighter in Israel's Golani Brigade, immigrated to Australia in the 1950s. Lowy leased the shopping concourse called the Mall at the World Trade Center, which comprised about 427,000 square feet of retail space. Today, Lowy and his 3 sons control Westfield Corporation, one of the largest operators of shopping centers in the United States and the world. Lowy is described by the Sydney Morning Herald as, quote, a self-made man with a strong interest in the Holocaust and Israeli politics, unquote. Dov Zakheim's SPC Corporation provided the flight termination system and command transmitter system. Some people have posited that the planes that flew into the towers were remote controlled. Although sounding like science fiction to the average person, This technology has existed for several decades. In an emergency situation in which pilot and co-pilot have been incapacitated, ground control can take control of a plane and fly it safe and sound to its destination. The argument for the use of this technology would be to say that to ensure that the planes met their targets, instead of relying on some supposed suicide hijackers who might bail out at the last minute, remote control technology was used. We are not here to argue for this point, nor disagree with it, but it is more than telling that System Planning Corporation, or SPC, designs, manufactures, and distributes highly sophisticated technology that enables an operator to fly by remote control as many as 8 different airborne vehicles at the same time from one position, either on the ground or airborne. System Planning Corporation markets the technology to take over the controls of an airborne vehicle already in flight. For example, the flight termination system technology could hijack hijackers and bring the plane down safely. The flight termination system can be used in conjunction with the CTS technology that can control up to 8 airborne vehicles simultaneously. The possibility of nefarious use of these brilliant technologies developed and deployed by Systems Planning Corporation certainly deserves careful consideration in any full and impartial investigation of what actually took place on 9/11. In the context of 9/11, it also needs to be pointed out that Rabbi Dov Zakheim was Chief Executive Officer of System Planning Corporation's International Division until President George W. Bush appointed him Undersecretary of Defense and Comptroller of the Pentagon. Not long before Rabbi Zakheim rose to power over the Pentagon's labyrinthine, bottomless accounts, he co-authored an article entitled Rebuilding America's Defenses, Strategy, Forces, and Resources for a New Century, which was published by the Project for a New American Century in September 2000, exactly a year before 9/11. In this article, on page 51, it is stated that, quote, "The process of transformation, even if it brings revolutionary change, is likely to be a long one, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event, like a new Pearl Harbor," unquote. Larry Silverstein, a key figure in the Jewish crime network, dual Israeli citizen and World Trade Center leaseholder who pocketed $4 billion for the attacks of 9/11. Somehow Silverstein had the mysterious foresight to insure both of the towers with an insurance policy specifically covering acts of terrorism just weeks before September 11th, 2001. But things get more absurd than this. Enter P-TECH. The Israeli Mossad also had their hands in the most sensitive computer networks in the U.S. government through a little-known firm called P-TECH. 9/11 was also a computer crime. America's security apparatus and infrastructure would have reacted to the hijacking, then scrambled fighter jets, and would have eliminated the threats to thousands of Americans. Unfortunately, most of the critical computer systems were run by P-TECH. This left gaping holes in the communication networks and interoperability between the computer systems, which would allow a hijacker to cause severe miscommunication and delay any reaction to the real-time hijacking. Keep in mind, there were drills going on of flights crashing into buildings on 9/11, as well as other drills, such as Operation Northern Vigilance, Operation Vigilant Guardian, Operation Northern Guardian, and Operation Vigilant Warrior. Joe Bergantino, a reporter for WBZ-TV's investigative team, was torn. He could risk breaking a story based on months of work investigating a software firm linked to terrorism, or heed the government's demand to hold the story for national security reasons. In mid-June, Bergantino received a tip from a woman in New York who suspected that P-TECH, a computer software company in Quincy, Massachusetts, had ties to terrorists. P-TECH specialized in developing software that manages information contained in computer networks. Bergantino's investigation revealed that P-TECH's clients included many federal government agencies, including the U.S. Army, the U.S. Air Force, the U.S. Naval Air Command, Congress, the Department of Energy, the Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA, and the Internal Revenue Service, as well as NATO and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and moreover, the Secret Service and even the White House. On the surface, it seemed P-TECH can be linked to Saudis and Arabs, as they are the frontmen financiers of P-TECH. This is not dissimilar to the pattern, as the deceptive alternative media has also linked the official story's antagonists as night teen hijackers from Saudi Arabia. However, this is another clever smokescreen. Recall our mention of the word Sayanim, which means a Jewish informant or helper. Michael Goff, a criminal Jew who comes from a long line of B'nai B'rith Freemasons, left a very cushy job with the law firm of Cedar and Chandler to work for Arabs and run marketing for an unknown software company. Michael Goff was marketing manager at P-TECH Incorporated, a leading provider of business process modeling, design, and development software. In this capacity, Michael managed various marketing programs and activities, including public relations, direct mail, web development, collateral, trade shows, and seminars. Additionally, Michael worked closely with the P-TECH sales organization to perform competitive analysis as well as manage lead tracking and fulfillment activities. Goff also worked for an Israeli-run computer security company called Guardium. Guardium is a database security firm, clearly a Mossad operation working in a critical area, the same area that the two planes that hit the World Trade Center originated, Boston's Logan Airport. The three firms that finance Guardium are all Israeli and all manned by Mossad agents. It should be noted that Mossad's headquarters is in Herzliya. It is clear that the three firms, Cedar Fund, Veritas Venture Partners, and Stage One, are all Mossad funding outfits. So with P-TECH, what we had was an American Cyan, i.e. a Jewish agent who works with the Mossad when necessary, Michael S. Goff, who had Mossad agents feeding him information and directing him while he worked with his Lebanese Muslim partners in P-TECH. Now, why would a young American lawyer working with a good law firm in his hometown suddenly leave the practice of law and work with a dodgy startup software company owned and financed by a Lebanese and a Saudi? Goff's family is a well-respected and well-known family in Worcester, Massachusetts. After law school, he had it made at the law firm. Why the sudden career change? It is clear that Goff is one of several 100,000 Sayanim, and he was tapped by Mossad to do a quick career change for the good of the Jewish people and Israel, of course. Under Goff, P-TECH software loaded with trapdoors and Trojan horses was sold and loaded onto the most sensitive computer systems, which subsequently failed miserably, or performed well, depending on your view, on September 11th, 2001. Goff's father and grandfather, Samuel, were accountants who belonged to Worcester's Commonwealth Lodge 600 of B'nai B'rith. They were both 32nd degree Masons. But P-TECH wasn't the only software firm that was involved with the massive breakdown in communication on 9/11. Because the attacks involved systems used by the FAA, NORAD, and the U.S. Air Force, the conspirators would have needed super user access to the command and control centers of these three separate organizations. One such company is MITRE Corporation. Indara Singh, an IT consultant who previously worked on a Defense Advanced Research Project, or DARPA project, and who was employed by JP Morgan on 9/11 in risk management, pointed to MITRE's role at the FAA during the 9/11 Citizens Commission hearings in New York in September 2004. Quote, P-TECH was with the MITRE Corporation in the basement of the FAA for 2 years prior to 9/11, Singh said. Quote, their specific job is to look at interoperability issues the FAA had with NORAD and the Air Force in the case of an emergency. If anyone was in a position to know that the FAA, that there was a window of opportunity or to insert software or to change anything, it would have been P-TECH along with MITRE. unquote. The MITRE Corporation is a major defense contracting organization headed by the former Director of Central Intelligence, or DCI, which was none other than Jew Dr. James Rodney Schlesinger. Schlesinger, who was reportedly made DCI at the request of Henry Kissinger in 1973, later served as Secretary of Defense. Schlesinger, a former Director of Strategic Studies at the RAND Corporation, was described in a 1973 biography as a devout Lutheran, although he was born in New York in 1929 to immigrant Jewish parents from Austria and Russia. Schlesinger earned 3 degrees from Harvard University. Schlesinger's father, an accountant, founded the accounting firm Schlesinger and Haas and was a trustee and chairman of the budget of the Stephen Wise Free Synagogue. His father was also a member of the New York State Grand Lodge of Masons. On 17th October 2001, Michelle Moad reported in the Mercury of Philadelphia that 2 men were caught by federal immigration authorities with detailed footage of the Sears Tower in Chicago, Illinois. The authorities described them as Middle Eastern men. Police arrived on the scene due to a call from Pizzeria Uno, a restaurant whose manager reported that the men had a tractor trailer and were dumping something described as a pile of furniture at the rear of the pizzeria. Of the 2 men, one identified himself as Moshe Almakayas, age 30. This person fled the scene, according to police. The manager of the restaurant reported to the officers that the vehicle read Moving Systems Incorporated and included a phone number. The Middle Eastern man, later identified as Ron Qatar, age 23, exited the vehicle and said that the operator, 30-year-old Moshe Almakayas, was across the street. He was spotted with a Jewish female, Eilert Reisler, age 23, across the street, but she soon began to walk in the opposite direction of Almakayas as soon as she was spotted by the police. When Reisler was apprehended, searched, and questioned, she was found to have a German passport in her name and medication in another. Getting back to Almakayas, he stated that he didn't dump any furniture behind the restaurant and that he was on his way to a customer in New York. He was unable to provide either an address or phone number for the customer. When an arriving officer examined the vehicle, it was found to be in numerous violations and even not in safe working order, and was subsequently put out of commission. The truck was, in fact, loaded to 3/4 capacity with household items, boxes, and furniture. Officer Gerald Swartz of the Whitpain Police Department found a video camera amongst the load. Plymouth police officer David McCann reviewed the tape and found that it had footage of Chicago, but suspiciously had numerous zoom-in shots of the Sears Tower. The 3 suspects were eventually questioned by the FBI and detained by INS. The Israelis were eventually released, but coupled with the antics of the dancing Jews that were caught on 9/11 and their front company, Urban Moving Systems, and these suspicious characters and their supposed moving company, is it possible that the plane that went down in Pennsylvania was intended for the Sears Tower in Chicago before the aircraft made an abrupt change of course over the state of Ohio?
Israeli Mossad terrorist operations extend to numerous countries. Here is just one example apart from 9/11 and others that we have briefly covered. As reported in La Voz de Altasan, 2 men posing as press photographers, one of them a former Israeli colonel and Mossad agent, were arrested inside the Mexican Congress on October 10, 2001, armed with 9mm pistols, 9 grenades, explosives, 3 detonators, and 58 bullets, but were released following intense pressure from the Israeli embassy. The report stated, "We believe that the 2 Zionist terrorists were going to blow up the Mexican Congress." The second phase was to mobilize both the Mexican and U.S. press to blame Osama bin Laden. Most likely then Mexico would declare war on Afghanistan as well, commit troops and all the oil it could spare to combat Islamic terrorism. As reported in La Voz de Altasan, Los Angeles, Alta California. In a mind-blowing development, La Voz de Altasan has learned that the Mexican Army General Rafael Marcial Macedo de la Concha, who heads the Procuraduras General de la República, that's the Mexican Department of Justice, has released the retired Israeli Defense Force Colonel and presumed Mossad agent Salvador Gerexen Smeki, an Israeli illegal immigrant, Sar Ben-Zevi, after both had penetrated the security of the Mexican Congress and were in possession of guns, hand grenades, and explosives. This morning, La Voz de Altasan had a personal telephone interview with Mexican Congressional Press Secretary, Licenciada Adriana Lopez, and verified the arrest of two Israelis after they had entered through the highly secure front entrance of the Palacio Legislativo de San Larzo. She stated to La Voz de Altasan that the two terrorists had taken advantage of the situation that had occurred about 1700 hours of Wednesday, October 10th, when a large contingent of sugar industry unionists were entering through the metal detectors. The two Israelis followed about 50 of the unionists to the office of the President of Mexican Congress, Beatriz Paredes. The two Israelis were first pretending to be press photographers, but called attention to the sugar unionists because of their nervous and out-of-ordinary behavior. About 10 of the unionists confronted them and observed that they were carrying guns and what looked to them to be explosives. They held the two Israelis until official congressional security personnel took them into custody. The head of congressional security, Salvador Alarc, verified that the Israelis had in their possession 9 grenades, sticks of dynamite, detonators, wiring, and 2mm Glock automatics. Mexican Congressional Press Secretary Licenciada Adriana Lopez informed La Voz de Altasan in the telephone interview that congressional security then turned the terrorists Salvador Gerexen Smeki, age 34, and Sar Ben-Zevi, age 27, to the Procuraduras General de la República, Mexican Department of Justice, which is headed by Mexican Army General Rafael Marcial Macedo de la Concha. Initial reports by the Procuraduría General de la República, PGR, were that both Israelis worked for a private security agency and that they both had gun permits. It turned out that there was no connection to either suspect to any private security agency. The PGR has released the retired Israeli IDF colonel with the official explanation that he had a legal permit to carry a gun. They also released the illegal Israeli immigrant on about $4,000 bail and had the case turned over to the Mexican immigration authorities. Mexican Congressional Press Secretary Licenciada Adriana Lopez was surprised to hear from La Voz de Altasan of the release of the two Israelis. La Voz de Altasan has also learned that the Israeli embassy used heavy-handed measures to have the two Israelis released. Very high-level emergency meetings took place between Mexican Secretary of Foreign Relations Jorge Gutman, General Macedo de la Concha, and a top Ariel Sharon envoy who flew to Mexico City especially for that purpose. Elias Luff of the Israeli embassy worked night and day, and their official spokeswoman, Hilla Engelhardt, went into high gear after many hours of complete silence. What went on during those high-level meetings, no one knows, but many in Mexico are in disbelief at their release. Guns and any kind of explosive is highly illegal for Mexican citizens, and the fact that these two Israelis had them inside the Mexican Congress makes their release highly suspect. What is really going on? Jorge Gutman, the Mexican Foreign Secretary, has very strong Zionist connections and himself is of the Jewish descent. Mexican Army General Macedo de la Concha has strong connections to the U.S. military industrial complex and through this to the Israeli Defense Forces. Have any of these connections influenced the decisions to release the two Zionists?
former Italian President Francisco Cossega, who revealed the existence of Operation Gladio, told Italy's oldest and most widely read newspaper that the 9/11 terrorist attacks were run by the Mossad, and that this was common knowledge among global intelligence agencies. In what translates awkwardly into English, Cossega told the newspaper Corriere della Sera, all the intelligence services of America and Europe know well that the disastrous attack has been planned and realized from the Mossad, with the aid of the Zionist world, in order to put into accusation the Arabic countries and in order to induce the Western powers to take part in Iraq and Afghanistan, unquote. The script for Missing Links was originally over 5 hours. Due to time constraints, many key individuals with established connections to 9/11 could not be examined. Here are a few ancillary pieces of evidence and information which you may research in greater detail on your own. It is possible that these will be exhaustively addressed in another film by the makers of Missing Links or by other investigators in the future. We encourage you to do your due diligence in investigation. Jack Abramoff. He entertained the supposed lead hijacker Mohammed Atta aboard his yacht. Keep in mind that the argument of this video is that personalities such as Atta were only used as misdirection. Such villains like Osama bin Laden are mere inventions of the Jewish crime network and are thus hardly worth mention, save for their direct connection to the Jews who planned, orchestrated, and benefited from 9/11. Isser Harel, a Polish Khazar Jew who founded Israel's Mossad. He ran Mossad from 1947 to 1963. He was director of Shin Bet from 1948 to 1952 and Haganah. In his career as a Jewish terrorist, he was also intimately involved in the JFK assassination. As a side note, the film, which unashamedly shows the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, was filmed by Abraham Zapruder. Zapruder is a Jew. The Zapruder film serves as a warning to anyone who would attempt to take on the Jewish mafia. It was absolutely no coincidence that a Jew happened to catch the assassination on video camera. But the topic of the Jewish hand in the JFK assassination is the subject for another film. Getting back to Isser Harel, it is extremely important to mention that Harel predicted in 1979 that the, quote, tallest building in New York City, unquote, would be hit by, quote unquote, terrorists because it was a phallic symbol. The fact that 9/11 was planned by the Jews through the admittance of Isser Harel is documented in a book by Michael Evans. Evans is a Jewish Khazar masquerading as a Christian. This is referred to as a crypto-Jew. Benjamin Netanyahu. When asked on 9/11 what the September 11th attack meant for U.S.-Israeli relations, Netanyahu plainly stated, "It's very good." He also wrote a book in the early 80s titled Terrorism: How the West Can Win. He was the Prime Minister of Israel to whom the Clean Break document, or ACB doc, was presented. Benjamin Chertoff. Benjamin is Michael Chertoff's cousin. This Jewish criminal personality is responsible for writing a hit piece debunking so-called 9/11 conspiracy theories. Benjamin wrote the article for Popular Mechanics. Ever wonder why even the most well-known 9/11 conspiracy movies never bothered to mention the Jewish crime network? We gently suggest that it's time to start questioning not only those who attempt to debunk 9/11 conspiracy theories, but also question the very people who put forth such theories, with nary a mention of the exhaustive facts we have detailed herein that have been readily available to any investigator. Ronald Lauder, a key Cyan, or Jewish criminal asset, cosmetics Estee Lauder magnate, he founded a school for the Mossad in Herzliya called the Lauder School for Government, Diplomacy, and Strategy. Ronald Lauder is also president of the Jewish National Fund and former chairman of New York Governor George Pataki's Commission on Privatization. He is the key individual who pushed the privatization of the World Trade Center and the former Stewart Air Force Base, where the flight paths of the two planes that hit the Twin Towers oddly converged. Ronald Lauder played a significant, albeit unreported, role in the preparation for 9/11. Amit Yoran, founder and director of Guardium. He went to West Point and became the manager of computer network security for the Pentagon and Secretary of Defense. Yoran went on to serve as the czar of cybersecurity for the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, which is run by criminal Jew Michael Chertoff. Stephen Kaufman, program leader for the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, cover-up of World Trade Center 7 crimes. Even after 7 years, NIST releases a report reaffirming the official fairy tale about the collapse of World Trade Center Building 7. Kroll Associates. Kroll Associates was responsible for revamping security at the World Trade Center after the 1993 terrorist bombing. Douglas France of the New York Times reported in 1994. This is a crucial point because those who controlled security at the World Trade Center are prime suspects in the demolition of the Twin Towers. The first plane struck directly into the computer room of Marsh, or Kroll USA, in the North Tower. Or rather, it was precision-guided on 9/11. Israeli Aerospace Industries, prime suspect for leasing possible flight termination systems, FTS technology-equipped airplanes to the airlines. IAI is ran by Shalom Yoran. Jerome Hauer. John O'Neill, the former chief of counterterrorism with the FBI, who had investigated al-Qaeda, was the head of security for the World Trade Center complex and was reportedly killed on his first day of work on 9/11. O'Neill had been appointed to this position by the managing director of the Kroll Security Company, Jerome M. Hauer. Kroll evidently continued to manage security for the World Trade Center complex from 1993 until 9/11. Prior to joining Kroll, Hauer, a Jew, had been the director of Mayor Giuliani's Office of Emergency Management, or OEM, where he had been the driving force to have the OEM command bunker built into Larry Silverstein's 47-story World Trade Center Building 7, the tower which fell into its footprint at 5:21 p.m. on 9/11. Testimony from Larry Silverstein and physical evidence strongly suggest that World Trade Center Building 7 was demolished with explosives, specifically using a substance known as thermite. Where were our intelligence agencies before, on, and after 9/11? While there have been numerous analysts, operatives, and employees of the various U.S. investigative and espionage organizations who have come forward, it remains to be seen that the FBI, CIA, or other such groups have thwarted the Jewish criminal network. We must first understand who controls these organizations to understand their lack of commitment to America. Given the FBI and CIA's repeated ineptness and closing down of investigations into the Jewish crime network, it should be pretty clear who controls those two branches of our government. But what about the National Security Agency? On 4th November 1952, Harry Solomon Truman, the 33rd President of the United States, formed the National Security Agency, or NSA. The operational objective of the NSA is to secure and protect the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. The NSA may break any law so long as their actions return to that single objective.
Los hoch. Hey! Option! Hoch!
When it comes to secretive organizations such as the NSA, one can never be too sure what their objectives are, and if the total organization, or part of it, are controlled by anti-American elements. As outsiders, we can observe exterior evidence and hopefully reach some solid conclusions. On 16th June 2006, Christopher Boleyn, a reporter for the American Free Press, reported that the NSA has selected, as their encryption software, a program developed by RSA Security Encryption Software. RSA stands for the names of the founders of the firm: Ronald L. Rivest, Adi Shamir, and Leonard M. Edelman. Adi Shamir, the lead theoretician, is an Israeli citizen and a professor at the Weizmann Institute, a scientific institution tied to the Israeli defense establishment. On 3rd August 2006, as reported at Salon.com by Sidney Blumenthal, the NSA was apparently sharing signal intelligence to Israel to monitor whether Syria and Iran were supplying new armaments to Hezbollah, as it was firing hundreds hundreds of missiles into northern Israel. On 2nd February 2007, the ACLU added a video to their YouTube account which shows American Civil Liberties Union members attacking the NSA for domestic spying. ACLU is, of course, a Jewish-controlled organization, and of note, ACLU members in the video are Jewish.
Americans have no assurance today, and they will have no assurance tomorrow without an injunction that their phone calls and emails are safe from the prying eyes of the NSA.
On 30th October 2007, as reported by Wayne Madsen, who was formerly employed by the NSA, the organization is now threatened with possible infiltration by Israeli spies. Mr. Madsen notes that the National Security Agency was penetrated by Israeli contractors working for Israel's Mossad organization. This was done via programs initiated by the Reagan administration, which sought to involve Israel in NSA-related signals intelligence activities, Dindy and Pyrex. Madsen asserts that the NSA has always harbored skepticism about Israel, quoting him that due to, quote, the Israeli attack on the NSA signals intelligence ship, the USS Liberty, in 1967, it was an attack that is now considered by a majority of historians and intelligence experts to have been a deliberate attack aimed at blindsiding U.S. intelligence from war crimes being carried out by Israel in the Sinai Desert during the 1967 Arab-Israeli War, unquote. Some questions remain. Why was the NSA supplying intelligence to Israel? Why is the Jewish-controlled ACLU preaching against the NSA? Why is the NSA still doing business with Israel when it is known that the USS Liberty was an NSA ship and it was Israel that intentionally attacked and killed 34 Americans on board and wounded over 170 others? Finally, why is Israel trying to infiltrate the NSA if they already seem to have such a close and favorable relationship?
Who are you guys?
If the intelligence world was a family, think of us as the uncle no one ever talks about.
In addition to the special thanks given at the introduction to this video, we also extend thanks to the New Jersey, New York, and Illinois police departments. Thank you for your service. A portion of the text that has been narrated for this video came from sources which are known to be double agents for the Jewish crime network. The research of such individuals is good, yet no credit will be given to these individuals in order to deny them any kind of promotion by the makers of this video. Trusted individuals that contributed to the production of this video may have their names cited at the website for this video. Thank you for watching.